Welcome to the first episode of the Soul Knows podcast. My name is Joe Powell. Today's guest is Pastor E.C. Maltbia of the True Holiness Saint Center here in Conway, Arkansas. How are you today, Pastor?
Joey, I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing real well. I hadn't seen you in a long time.
I've been keeping up with you on social media, man. You've had a powerful testimony.
Yeah. Full disclosure, me and the pastor went to school together. Didn't really run around the same crowds necessarily, but we were friendly.
That's
I
right.
mean, we didn't have any crosswords or anything, which I think nobody ever really had a whole lot of crosswords with either one of us. I think we were pretty well liked. You a little bit more of a big man on campus than I was, but what I want to do in this podcast is really delve into people's spiritual journey. Like I was talking to the pastor a little bit earlier, I think everybody has a story to tell, and I think your soul's journey is the most important journey you're ever going to go down.
Absolutely.
Because everything that you go through in life, your soul's with you. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody's relationship with the divine, whether it's whatever doctrine they follow, whether they don't follow doctrine, whether it's their connection to nature or whatever it is. We're going to try to to unravel all the mysteries of what people's journey is and what people's journeys are, and just see where they've come through in life. See if they feel like they've gotten to a point where, I'm not going to say things are all figured out, but if you got to a point where you think you might have control of things, because I think a spiritual journey sometimes will rattle you sometimes. Absolutely. I mean, it really will. It really will. But let's talk about your beginnings a little bit. Like I said, I moved here in the 8th grade. I knew you were at school here. I don't know if you started here, if you come from here.
I was born and raised in Conway, Arkansas.
Okay.
And, of course, went to school to Conway Public Schools. From there, went to the University of Central Arkansas. Stayed there 3 years and then decided to dedicate my life strictly to our church. Mm-hmm. And was ordained in the Church of God in Christ, which is a sister church of the Assemblies of God. Mm-hmm. And started pastoring at the age of 21. And the rest is, I guess, what they say is history.
Right. Now, this was the church originally on UCA's campus? Am I right? Am I correct? Or am I getting confused?
The church in True Holiness Saint Center is a church plant.
Right.
But I have always had a college ministry on UCA's campus. Okay. And so I was the college minister at our local church before I founded True Holiness.
Gotcha.
And then continued with a college ministry that's been there almost 30 years now.
Right. Okay. Now, was your family a religious family, or, did you have a...
Sure.
Okay.
I come from a Christian background, strong Christian home. Got several ministers in my family.
Yeah.
And, they taught us to love God, to take care of your family, and the importance of education.
Right.
Those are 3 very strong things. Let your word be your word, and be a upstanding person.
Okay. So you said it was Assemblies of God, so that's pretty much what you associate this...
Well, it's the Church of God in Christ, and actually, if you go back and look at the history, the Church of God in Christ actually ordained the first Assembly of God ministers in Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Okay.
Back years ago, it was one church. Both of them fellowshiped together, and back then there was a lot of issues with segregation and racism, and they decided, from my understanding, for peace sake, to split the churches.
Gotcha.
And so they're very similar in function. But even though I grew up Pentecostal, classical Pentecostal church, the church that I pastor is a non-denominational church.
Okay.
And so we've got a lot of people from a lot of different denominations that have come together.
Right.
And I think more than anything, they just come together for the central theme of Christ.
Right.
So when people ask me about True Holiness, I tell them we have a twofold purpose here at our church. And the first one is to empower people. And then the second is to influence your community. And when I talk about empowering people, first and foremost, I'm talking about empowering them to connect with God. It is my belief that everybody needs to have a personal relationship with God, not through a minister or someone else, but I want to teach people to know God for themselves. So to empower them spiritually. We want to empower people relationally. I think it's so important for people to learn how to get along.
Right.
Husband and wife, parents and children, co-workers. But I also think it's important to get along with those that are hard to get along with.
Right.
And so I think that's very important. So you talk about spiritually, you talk about relationally. I think we should be empowered physically. You know, the Bible talks about that your bodies are the temple of God.
Right.
So you should honor yourself with your body. And so here at our church, we spend at least 1 month out of the year what we call Health Awareness Month.
Right.
Where we bring in physicians and doctors and different ones to come help us to be proactive in our health.
Right.
And so that has everything to do with exercise, to your stress management, to how much sleep you get, to eating and all of those different things. But I think that's important. And so I think another one that I think that is really important is empowering the single family unit.
Right.
And whether it's a traditional family or not, I think it's important for us to understand the sanctity of marriage and to help single parents raise their children. So that's a big part of what we do, empowering people. But on the other hand, we are really here to impact our community in a positive way.
Right.
The Bible talks about being salt and light, but I think it's important for us to be a voice in our community. And for us, I think that's important in government. And I don't mean from the perspective of, per se, running for office, but I think Christians should do that. I think that Christians oftentimes can show their faith through their vote. And so I think it's important for us to exercise our right to vote. But I think it's important for us to be actively involved in education. Whether children go the traditional route of college, or they go to a vocational, or they start their own business, become an entrepreneur. But I think helping to educate them to do that. I think mass media is important, whether you're talking about social media or television or radio. I think the church needs to have a voice there. And if you follow our church at all, these things that I'm talking about, you can see us progressively targeting those areas. And so that's just kind of what we do here at True Holiness, empowering people, impacting our community. And so I really feel like that I have been called to tear down walls of discord and build bridges of unity. And so that's what I've tried to do, kind of tried to cross denominational barriers, social economic barriers, racial barriers, and just kind of bring people together. We don't have to agree on everything. In fact, husband and wife doesn't agree on everything. I think we could probably argue that we don't agree on everything within ourselves. You know, we both talked about the importance of health a little bit earlier, and sometimes one side of me says go to the gym and the other side says no. So it's not always about agreeing on every issue, but being able to disagree and have a conversation without being disagreeable. To be able to have a difference of opinion and still be cordial and know how to respect one another. And so these are just some of the things that we have tried to do through our tenure here at True Holiness. We're in our 28th year. Our church started with 5 charter members. Our adult membership is somewhere over 300. Then our youth ministry. Here on our campus, I guess we sit on about 4 acres here. And God has been kind to us over the years.
Well, that's kind of goes into what we were talking about a little bit earlier about everyone's soul journey. I really do think it, just talking my opinion here, just really think that it is a very individual thing for every person. And I think what you were talking about, money, the church being a support system.
Absolutely.
When you leave this church, your soul is with you. That's your responsibility. That is your relationship with the divine, with God, with whoever you pray to. But what do you think the number one role is of a church? Do you think it is support? Do you think it's edifying people? Or do you think it is for setting an example. That's a pretty
Sure.
probably. I know it's all of the above, but what do you think?
Well, I really believe that the church is multifaceted.
Right.
And I think our priority is to connect them with the divine. And for me, that's connecting them to have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
And once you do that, that relationship will move into the other things that you talked about.
Right.
And so even the things I talked about empowering people,
Mm-hmm.
it all begins with that true foundation of a Christian faith, at least for me.
Right.
And so I think the church should be that support system.
Mm-hmm.
I think the church should come alongside you and help you to reach your full potential.
Right.
I think the church should also be a guiding post.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you have questions, the church ought to help you in the right direction to get the right answers. And I certainly believe the church ought to be examples.
Right.
And we're not perfect, but we still should be examples. Because sometimes the best thing you can teach a person is how to fall well.
Right.
All of us, we are imperfect people. We live in an imperfect world. And we're all going to make mistakes from time to time.
Right.
And I think some of the biggest lessons you can teach someone is how to get up from your mistake.
Right.
That's what I mean by failing or falling well.
Right.
And so whether we are teaching them through example or teaching them as I'm up speaking before them, the example is a big part of that.
Right. Now let's get into your background a little bit. How much have you studied other beliefs, other religions, other philosophies? Do you find truths in other areas? It's kind of a. I wouldn't. This is not really a very good analogy, but. For example, if you were a coach of a team, you would study another team necessarily. You know what I mean? Do you find yourself, reading up on things and like I said, trying to find truths in other stuff, and really trying to understand people's point of view from where they come from, whether it's a certain part of the world, whether it's a certain background, because I think to touch someone's soul, I think you really need to understand them as much as possible.
Sure.
And I think, understanding, if, for example, if somebody come in and wanted to sit through a sermon and you notice that they were somebody you hadn't seen before, and I'm sure you'd probably greet them, or somebody would greet them and say, hey, welcome to church. Or at least afterwards you say, thanks for having you. But if somebody said, yeah, I'm a Muslim, I just wanted to come in and see what was going on, I'm sure you would welcome them.
Absolutely.
But what would be your approach to that point? After that point, would you want to sit with them, or would you wait for them to approach you? Maybe they're saying that I'm kind of having issues with my faith. I'm kind of exploring some other stuff. How would you? Have you had that kind of a situation?
Well, absolutely. And I'll say this first of all. Every situation is different.
Right.
But more than anything else, people want to know how much you care about.
Right.
And so I think before I dove into any deep religious conversations, I would try to establish a rapport with them.
Right.
Once we have a rapport together, then certainly I want to know why they believe what they believe.
Right.
And I think it better helps me to share my faith with them as well.
Right.
But to answer your question, do I go out and study other religions? I hope that I take the time to study people.
Right.
Much more than religions themselves.
Right.
And there are times because you want to know why a person believes what they believe. And so I always do background research when the time is appropriate.
Right.
So I guess I hope that answers your question. But more than anything else, I want to try to build a rapport with that person.
Right.
Because in my opinion, religion and finances are two of the most confidential areas in a person's life.
Right.
And those are two areas they can get real offended by very quickly.
Right.
If you start asking too many questions.
Right.
And so I really feel like you have to earn the right to ask those type of questions with
Right.
them.
Right.
And some people are more free about that than others.
Right.
Sometimes it takes a little bit more time. But I think as the church, that's part of our journey to walk that with them.
Right. I believe it's, in not just the soul's journey, but I think in any journey, I think finding commonalities.
Absolutely.
For example, if you had someone come in here who identifies as a pagan or a witch or whatever, and said, I find truth in nature. Well, you find truth in nature. You see God in nature. You see God in a waterfall and a beautiful tree.
Absolutely.
A Muslim person or a Buddhist or a Hindu would say there's certain commonalities. I think when you start finding those between different beliefs, you find that people are more alike than they are different. I just think that people are coming to some different conclusions, or coming to conclusions like we talked about, two people sitting, in the same pew having different, aspects of what they're hearing from the sermon or what they're, experiencing in life. But I think there are commonalities with the human experience on how we experience the world around us. All of us at some time or another are going to be brought to tears, not only by sadness, but by happiness. That's going to happen to you in your life. There's going to be a song. There's going to be a moment in a movie. There's going to be a moment in your life. There's going to be a childbirth. There's going to be a wedding. There's something that's going to bring you to tears. That's a commonality. That's the human. That's the soul. When when you cry, when you laugh, that's the soul coming out of you. You know what I mean? That's not the body. That's the soul. And those are those commonalities that we all experience. That I think we've put so many things between us that have separated us so much, instead of looking at all those commonalities. There's so much of a them and us, you're wrong, I'm right kind of thing. Sure. Instead of, like you said, we all like to eat. We all sleep. We all love. We all have, all the emotions and everything. We all experience things. I'm just really interested in people's openness to different ideas. If, for example, if someone was to sit and talk to you that was of a different faith or, a different belief, and wanted to talk about some things that you kind of weren't really about, would you be open to things like that? You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's always on the individual basis of what the subjects are, and those type of things. And just to say that in the extreme.
Right.
And let me say this first of all. I think it is so important that you find common ground with everyone. But I think finding common ground with the individual is the beginning of the journey.
Right.
Not the goal of the journey.
Right. Right.
And so finding common ground is where you're going to begin.
Right.
But I think at some point you've got to get to non-negotiables.
Right.
And I think that is the goal, to get to those non-negotiables in your life. And like I said, that might take considerable amount of time to get there.
Right.
And so, for instance, we might find common ground that we both like sports.
Right.
I'm a Washington football team fan. Most of Arkansas are Cowboy fans.
Right.
But we can find common goal and we like football.
Right.
However, as we continue that conversation, we can go and we can eat wings together.
Right.
You might like Buffalo Wild Wings. I might like the wings somewhere else.
Right.
But we can find common ground in those wings.
Right.
But that's not the goal. That's the beginning of the relationship. At some point, as that relationship deepens, and I think particularly as a pastor, it is my job to get to those non-negotiables. One of those would be the person I'm talking to might feel like that it's okay to have a wife and have a girlfriend on the side.
Right.
Where for me, that's a non-negotiable. And I'm not interested in finding common goal in a non-negotiable.
Right.
For me, someone could say, well, there are many ways to God. For me, that's a non-negotiable. I'm going to say that the way to God is Jesus.
Right.
That's a non-negotiable. And so, yes, we're going to find common ground. And I think we need to do that because we're much more alike than we are in our differences.
Right.
But I think at some point, from a pastor's perspective, you've got to get to those non-negotiables.
Right.
And at that point, that's when you really have to decide where the relationship is going to go from there.
Right. Yeah, it's. I guess it's there's a difference between having a cordial relationship and having a personal relationship.
Absolutely.
And really trying to delve into though. Do you consider yourself constantly a student?
Oh, absolutely.
In other words, not just of life, but of your soul growth.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we need to be lifelong learners.
Right.
I think we should be able to think outside the box. I think we should know that everybody can teach you something.
Right.
If you listen.
Right.
And so I agree 100%. And I really believe that there are some good things in different religions.
Right.
And so I'm not a small, closed-minded person in that sense.
Right.
But we were just speaking towards my goal as a pastor.
Right.
But I can tell you this. I've got cordial relationships with people from a lot of different faiths.
Right.
I've got cordial relationships with, and really I call them cordial, but I have even close relationships with people that we don't believe everything the same.
Right.
But those that are closest to me know my non-negotiables.
Right.
And most of them, I know their non-negotiables. And sometimes the best thing for the relationship, in order for the relationship to continue, is to agree to disagree in some areas.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right.
Because I'm forever learning, they're forever learning. I would think that I'm not the same person that I was when we were in school.
Right.
Some 30 plus years ago.
Right.
And hopefully I'm not exactly the same person I was 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
And so we continue to grow and evolve. And I think that we need to be able to live and let live. But I think from a pastoral perspective, when you have that opportunity, whatever those non-negotiables are, I think you should share those. And really, I think if a person, and we can go back to, let's just say football teams. We can go back to football teams, and a person can tell me they don't understand why in the world I would be a Washington fan and give me all the stats and all the reasons, and I can tell them I don't see how in the world they could be Cowboy fans. And I have a lot of Cowboy fans in our church.
Right.
And sometimes we just agree to disagree on that area and go on and have a wonderful relationship.
Right. Let me ask you this. Do you think, I'm not going to use the word leniency, but do you think your perspective would be different if you weren't the leader of the church?
No.
Okay.
No. When it comes to non-negotiables. Now, we're just, at this time, talking about religious non-negotiables.
Right.
But there are a lot of non-negotiables we could talk about. And I'll give you another one. For me, a non-negotiable is when you tell somebody something, your word is your bond.
Right.
There are some people that feel like, hey, I say whatever I want to say. I don't have to have any accountability. But for me, that's a non-negotiable.
Right.
So it's not just in my faith, but I think it's in my life.
Right.
And so someone else might say, hey, one of my non-negotiables is I hit the gym 7 days a week.
Right.
That's not my testimony.
Right.
You can look at me and tell
Right.
that's not my testimony. But I can respect them for being there that many days, and I can give them a case of why I go 3 days a week.
Right.
But, what I want to make sure that I do with my Christian faith is not only to talk about those non-negotiables, not only to build those relationships, but above everything else, show through my actions, my attitude, the way I treat people, what I feel like the love of God is.
Right.
And it has a lot to do with tolerance as well as anything else. And so I'm saying that to say, sometimes I'm disappointed with passionate Christians, zealous Christians who are so passionate about the message, but they don't think about the method in which they
Right.
share
Right.
the message.
Right.
And so I never want to be a part of hate speech
Right.
or hateful in my delivery.
Right.
And so that's very important to me as well.
Right.
I grew up, and my parents always told me, it's not just what you say, but it's how you say it.
Absolutely.
It's the delivery
Absolutely.
that can make things better or worse.
Right.
And so I don't think it's all just about the message.
Right.
I think sometimes it's about the delivery.
Right.
And so from my perspective, I think the delivery, whether it's on Sunday morning or you and I sitting here today,
Right.
I think the delivery is so important.
Absolutely. So you're talking about like being, being an example. But what do you think is the most important thing when trying to connect with somebody on a soul level? Is it just being a genuine human being, or do you always find yourself in your mind referring to the doctrine? Mm-hmm. In other words, can you almost let that guard down, and so to speak, and I'm trying to figure out a way to phrase this. So what I'm trying to get at is people's actual soul connections, and I think the way you've gotten to understand your soul is through your Christian faith. Mm-hmm. But your soul will connect with somebody else's soul who hasn't found their soul connection through Christian faith. What is going to connect those two souls? And I understand there's going to be a bias to all of us based on our beliefs, and it's the same way as, like you said, it's the same way as you may have a bias as an American towards a French person, or whatever whatever you're discussing. I mean, there's always going to be a bias, but when it comes right down to that soul connection, human to human, if that's this is a bad example, but there, that like we were talking about, things like segregation. It's like there was a time that when certain people could be dying, I'm not giving that person mouth to mouth, kind of thing. That human connection has been broken on things that aren't important in the human connection. But can you think you could have a soul connection with somebody? And you talked about earlier about there's non-negotiables, but if I'm talking about that, there's a bonding on a level that's beyond us, that's beyond the Bible, that's beyond even our understanding, no matter how much we try to study it. Mm-hmm. It's like trying to figure out why people fall in love. Mm-hmm. There is a soul bond that happens, and many times it's out of your control. Mm-hmm. Can you see yourself having a soul bond, not only a love situation, but having a soul bond, somebody without bringing in the doctrine and the religious part of it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all going to begin with genuine care and respect for one another.
Right.
That's where it all begins.
Right.
And what people want to know is, do you respect them? Mm-hmm. Do you care about them? Mm-hmm. Those are basic human needs,
right,
that transcend beyond denominational walls and religious backgrounds and all of those things. People want to feel significant. They want to be seen.
Right.
Those are where those connections begin.
Right.
And like I said, as time goes, you can get into some other things. Mm-hmm. But I think just the general respect of your fellow man is where it all begins.
Right.
Because even when we sat down in here today, if there was not a general respect,
right,
this conversation would go a very different way.
Right.
And it wouldn't even have to be in the subject of a soul.
Right.
But just you can tell when people don't respect you, when
right,
people belittle you, when people are condescending to you. And that's when I talk about genuine relationship, I'm talking about genuine respect for human life, for another individual. That's the foundation, in my opinion. That's where everything begins.
Right.
And as you develop those relationships, as you begin to become closer and more open to one another, then you can begin to talk about some of the other things. But when someone comes to our church, we want them to know that we respect them as a person.
Right.
In fact, we want them to know that we respect that they have an opinion that may even be different from ours.
Right.
That's where things start, a genuine respect and love for one another.
Right.
And then you go into those other areas.
Right. We talked about how, growing as a person, and growth happens both ways. You can grow in a positive way or negative way. And, through a lifetime, you can grow in a positive way and switch back to a negative way or back to, it can, it's, I always go back to the Muhammad Ali quote, and I'm going to botch it because I don't know exactly. But it's, if I'm the same person when I'm 52 and I was when I'm 32, I wasted 20 years of my life.
Absolutely.
And it's like that in every aspect of life, right? But I think there are monumental moments in everybody's life.
Sure.
Have you had those monumental moments? I mean, has there been things that really set your foundation in your belief, and you thought, that's it, that's that I wouldn't say like a rubber stamp moment, but ooh, that's that kind of I'm trying to think of the word. I wouldn't say ratified, but it held your belief. You said, that's why I believe the way I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, I tend to be very practical, even in my expression of my religion. But there are what I call those supernatural moments that have certainly defined my life. So people ask me all the time, what made you start preaching?
Right.
When did you know that you were going to be a preacher? For me, there was not one moment that said, you're going to preach. For as long as I remember, I just always knew that's what I was called to do. That's what I was born to do. That's why I was on this earth. However, I can tell you that there were moments that I can't say were tangible, but they were certainly spiritual, that I felt like were those monumental moments. At the age of 16, when I officially started preaching, I had one of those moments at the age of 21 when I started pastoring. I had one of those moments when I felt like it was a spiritual thing. It was a God moment that said, Natasha Nicole will be your wife. Those type of things. But quite frankly, almost 6 years ago, and you and I were talking about this off the air, I had a heart attack. I was working out in Conway Regional's fitness center, 6 a.m. in the morning. And I had just done a run that normally would have been pretty easy, but it really took a lot of energy. And I was doing a chest exercise. And it was almost like somebody hit a windshield with a bat. And just had this pain in my chest, and I foolishly thought I pulled a muscle. So from Friday morning at 6 a.m. to Sunday evening at 6 a.m. I hadn't went to get any medical care. And as I was pulling out of my parents' driveway, senior citizens, I felt like I had one of those spiritual moments, that God moment that said, you've had a heart attack. You need to go to the hospital. And but I also got the assurance in that spiritual moment that it's going to be okay, but you need to go. And almost immediately I did just that. I got there and I was straightening a second heart attack. I ended up being rushed by ambulance to a facility in Little Rock, where I immediately went into surgery. And looking back on it, I have no long-term damage or anything like that. But those were those what I call God moments that you cannot explain naturally, but you just know from the inside that God was taking care of you. Now, you also have those type of moments through things that you experience in life, through the mentors that come through your life. Bishop D.L. Lindsay, he's in his 90s now.
Right.
But he was a pastor, a bishop, a mentor that helped me to shape my pastoral philosophy.
Right.
Mr. Ronnie Williams. Ronnie Williams was the head of student affairs at the University of Central Arkansas.
Okay.
Mentored me back in the 90s when I was in school. And from the 90s until now, has been a very influential person in my life. I mention him because on Thursday, the university named the student center after him.
Right.
And so I was with him. But having people like that in your life.
Right.
And so Mr. Williams, and the reason I mention him is he had a brother that was murdered in police custody when he was younger. And he could have taken a very different path in his life.
Right.
But watching his example and the example of others have helped to shape what I feel like my pathway to public service and pastoring in general.
Right. So, like I said, that moment like that, you knew it wasn't something you happened. You didn't hear anything. You just knew.
Just knew.
Just knew. It was just. What have you ever had any experience with, like a very overt sign? In other words, has something really been on your mind or something, and you leave a room and you come back and something was there that wasn't there, or maybe you're outside or something and you just, I know a lot of people think, things like feathers, and there's all kinds of different things that people believe in. But have you ever experienced anything where you just couldn't explain it, but it was outside of you, that you thought, man, that's a sign?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll say this, I believe through my Christian faith and my own experience that God speaks to us in a lot of different ways. And he'll speak to you one way that would never get my attention.
Right.
And he will speak to me in a different way.
Absolutely.
I'll give you an example of several years ago, had a family member that died very tragically, very brutally. And through the process of preparing for a funeral and a trial, I didn't have what I feel like an appropriate time frame to grieve.
Right.
You're kind of in business mode from a pastor's perspective and
Right.
a family leader. And one day coming home, pulled in the driveway, and the right song came on at the right time.
Absolutely.
That gave me the relief I needed, or the release I needed.
Right.
To grieve.
Right.
And to realize that was something that I needed to do.
Right.
That same song could have played for someone else and they never thought about
Right.
it.
Right.
But it was a sign I needed right then.
Absolutely.
That loved one was okay.
Right.
And that the family was going to be okay.
Right.
And so there are a lot of different signs. And I think, to answer your question, that God absolutely will speak to you through signs, will speak to you through people,
Right.
and will speak to you supernaturally, because they have all been a part of my life.
Right.
Over the years.
So I'm personally a big believer that there is a great coordination with our lives. In other words, and it's taken me a lifetime to realize this, that the time you go out and try to start the car and it won't start and it won't start, maybe it was because if you started it, you were about to get hit. Or maybe that you turned down that aisle at the grocery store and you bumped into that person that you met and married. You were supposed to turn down that aisle at the grocery store, and
Absolutely.
There's a lot of those moments that are coordinated, and everybody has belief. Not every. People have beliefs of what's coordinating that, but I think a lot of different people have the commonality of that there's something that's...
It wasn't a coincidence.
Right, wasn't a coincidence. Yeah, there's a lot of beliefs that, there's no such thing as coincidence. So, and you discussed this, talking about that, listen to that song. I know being a leader of a church, like being a parent, like being a husband, like you're a community leader. You're involved with a lot of different organizations. I've seen the thing on the Conway Regional thing today on Facebook. Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But we all have these moments where we have to deal with our life on our own.
Mm-hmm.
When there's, we don't always have somebody to lean on other than our belief.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's been times you've sat in this building with the lights out and thought, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
What am I going to preach about tomorrow? What am I, whatever's going on in your personal life, maybe sat and thought, have you ever had any moments of doubt? Have you ever thought, I'm done, I'm burnt out, I can't do this anymore, I want to do something else?
Mm-hmm.
You ever had anything like that? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is what I tell people all the time. The Bible talks about without faith it is impossible to please Him.
Mm-hmm.
So a big part of the Christian experience is faith. And if you had it all figured out, you wouldn't need faith.
Right.
And so there are certainly times in my life that I am reminded of my humanity,
Mm-hmm.
of my imperfection,
Mm-hmm.
of my weakness, of my inability to figure everything out.
Right.
But during those times, I am very honest in my prayer time.
Right.
And ultimately, it helps me to lean on my faith
Mm-hmm.
and remember why I believe what I believe.
Right.
Because I never want to get to the place as a pastor, a community leader, or a husband, or a person for that matter,
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like I've got it all figured out.
Right.
That I can do it all in my own strength.
Right.
And that's where faith comes in. During those moments when you feel like that you have reached your breaking point,
Right.
you have your faith to lean on.
Right.
You have your faith that will take you through the darkest moments of your life.
Right. Right.
And that has certainly happened for me.
Right.
And there are a lot of times that I've said, I don't think I can do this.
Right.
I don't think I can go any further.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been able to lean on my faith, and not only my faith, but I am blessed to have a tremendous support system,
Mm-hmm.
from my wife to my extended family to my friends and church that are there to hold your arms up when you're too weak to hold them up yourself.
Right. Right.
And so I think that's the secret sauce
Right.
between your faith and the people you surround yourselves with.
Right.
Those are the things that will help make or break you
Mm-hmm.
in life in general.
Right. I personally believe the strongest thing you could ever do is to admit you don't have the strength.
Absolutely.
To admit I need help.
Absolutely.
I don't have the answers. Please help me. And that's hard, especially for men. It's gotten a lot better. I think the younger generations are getting to be a little bit more open, but we were talking about health issues and things and personal, just life issues in general. Talking about that song, coming on and things like that, and faith and stuff, and having positive signs, and sometimes you get your faith rattled,
Mm-hmm.
and there's those moments where you're just, have you ever found yourself angry at God? Like, have you ever you ever to the point where you found yourself maybe saying something you wish you hadn't said, or done something you wish you hadn't done, maybe a really tragic moment, or a time where things weren't really going the way you thought they should be going,
Mm-hmm.
where you kind of just not only were kind of losing faith, but actually turned negative?
Mm-hmm. I have never been to a place in my life that I have lost my faith,
Mm-hmm.
but my faith is challenged quite a bit
Mm-hmm.
in different areas, in different ways. But through every challenge, ultimately it makes my faith stronger
Mm-hmm.
and bigger and greater. And I'll give you an example. Things that bothered me at the age of 21,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think about now.
Right.
Things that kept me up all night long.
Right.
Because my faith had taught me and life had taught me that those were not near as big of deals.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've learned that. And so there are times when I don't understand why
Mm-hmm.
God either does or allows things,
Mm-hmm.
but they have never made me be angry with God.
Mm-hmm.
It has never made me question my faith, as in, is this worth it?
Right.
But it has always challenged my faith to continue at the level of commitment and dedication that I have.
Right.
And ultimately, those experiences have made my faith stronger. And so I'll say it like this. I learned a long time ago not to pray, God, make things easier.
Mm-hmm.
I began to pray, make me stronger.
Right. Right.
And it's just like when you go in the gym, we were kind of talking about that earlier. You know, you can get on a bench press,
Right.
and whatever the weight is, 50 pounds, 350 pounds,
Right.
and you've got to decide, during that moment of struggle,
Mm-hmm.
am I going to go through the process of struggling
Right.
and ultimately become stronger?
Right.
Am I going to take some weight off
Right.
and stay where I am, or begin to diminish,
Right.
get weaker?
Right.
And so I think my faith has allowed me through those challenging times to get stronger. And I have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the best things I can say in that respect is life has taught me that I don't know a whole lot.
Right.
I mean, that's just,
right.
it has, and every time that I get up to minister, when I'm in community settings, I always go in knowing that if God doesn't direct me, if God doesn't help me, I could really easily make a mess of things.
Right.
And no, we don't always get things right, but our faith has taught us, and my faith has taught me, that when you go off course, you get back on, you admit where you're wrong, you make amends, and you move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big part of the Christian faith.
Right.
I think sometimes from a leader's perspective, we want to present ourselves as always having everything perfect. We want to present ourselves as being faultless, and that is not reality.
Right.
I think that it is important for us to be always striving to do better.
Mm-hmm.
That if you fail, you did it honestly.
Right.
You know, you were not intentionally trying to go the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think letting people know that, hey, you can make a mistake and move on. You can take a licking and keep on ticking.
Mm-hmm.
Our faith is what sustains us when nothing else will. That's
Right.
what I'm really saying.
Right. Yeah, I've always, I've got I don't know if you're familiar with the Invictus poem.
No.
It's the poem that Nelson Mandela read to himself every day, 27 years he's in prison. Mm-hmm. And it gave him strength. Mm-hmm. And it talks a lot about that. I've actually got the last stanza of that tattooed on the inside of my arm. If you, I'd read it, but I don't give it justice because in the movie Morgan Freeman plays
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela
Yeah.
Invictus, and he
I
reads
got you.
he reads that. So I encourage anybody to go back on YouTube and just Invictus poem with Morgan Freeman and listen to it. Mm-hmm. I guess I should have prepared the last stanza I could have read to you, but and it sums all that up. It basically is about being the captain of your own soul, is what
Mm-hmm.
it talks about, regardless of what your lot in life is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like what you're talking about. I mean, having that faith. You know, there's, like him, he was, wrongly in prison for 27 years, and he still had that faith. But and it's not, for a lot of people, the faith is not necessarily their faith in God, it's their faith in life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And both are connected, mm-hmm. but for some it's not. Mm-hmm. In other words, having faith in themselves, mm-hmm. having the faith in their own strength. Mm-hmm. God gives you strength, but you have to have faith that you're going to be able to hold up your end of the bargain. Mm-hmm. And you have to. I was messaged a friend the other day, and we'll go back to sports analogies, and I said, and this was somebody that doesn't know sports, and I said, in football, there's an expression called getting alligator arms. I said, it's, when the ball's coming, you don't want to reach out and grab it because you're afraid you're going to get hit. And a lot of us in life will pull those arms back, mm-hmm. because we're afraid of being hurt.
Right.
I told him, I said, I've done that a lot in my life, and those days are over with, and I think a lot of us don't have faith in our own strength, don't have faith in our own ability. And I think our spirituality, our connection with divine, helps in that aspect too. Not just having faith in God, but having faith in ourselves.
Right.
I mean, I think that's what it all boils down to. I think that's what all spirituality boils down to, is giving us the strength to know we can make it through this life that we've been given, regardless of the life that we are given. And that's a lot easier said than done. I know, because there's a lot of people that have there's people that have lives I could not even imagine.
Sure.
When you hear people that live in parts of the world where they don't know if they're going to make it home that day.
Right.
If their children are going to make it home. I mean, but I've really enjoyed this discussion we've had. I think we can talk a lot longer, but what I really kind of want to wrap up is, are you really happy with where you are at right now in your spiritual growth?
That's a good question. What I would say is this: I don't know that I would ever be satisfied. Happy, yes.
Right.
But not satisfied.
Right.
And so when I look at the things that I have been blessed to accomplish,
Right.
whether it's through our church or our community or, in fact, my family, I just always tend to see that there's more that can be accomplished.
Right.
And I try not to be that workaholic, but I think part of leadership is always pushing yourself to the next level.
Right.
So I am certainly happy and blessed beyond what I deserve, for certain, but satisfied, no.
Right.
So I think there's a difference between the two of being happy and being satisfied.
Well, let's put it this way: are you content?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Right.
I am every day trying to figure out what's the next thing we can do.
Right.
To grow personally, to grow the church, to be a blessing to other people.
Right.
But nowhere close to being content.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, am I worried about where I am? No.
Right.
But I just know I got a lot more work to do.
Right.
And so I just think that's the story of many leaders, not just me.
Right.
But going back to what you said a few minutes ago, and our Christian faith teaches us that faith without works or without corresponding actions dies. It's unfruitful.
Right.
You can't just say, I believe in the divine, or I believe in Christ Jesus. You've got to have a strong work ethic.
Right.
And so I strongly believe in rolling up your sleeves and working hard for what you want.
Right.
I'm a firm believer God is not going to do for you what you can do for yourself.
Right.
I'm just a firm believer in that. But he will help you in the areas that you can't do for yourself. And he'll certainly lead and guide you the whole way. But, Joe, man, I have enjoyed our discussion. I so appreciate you coming out and talking to me today. It's just good to catch up.
Yep.
And again, I think in a concluding statement, I would just say again that for me and a pastor, I want to relate to people right where they are.
Right.
That is the beginning. That's where the connection is. And we want to lead them to a non-negotiable spot for me of having that relationship with Christ Jesus. I think that's what my goal is above everything else. As a pastor, as a community leader, I think my goal is partially to remind people to be civil to one another.
Right.
And to be able to disagree without being disagreeable.
Right.
And to help lead our community in a positive direction. But, quite frankly, when it's all said and done, my focus is to be a good husband, a good father, a good brother, a good son. My family is extremely important.
Right.
And I know we didn't just talk a whole lot about family. But for me, it's my faith, then it's my family, then it's my church, and then so forth and so on. And so I would say that a big part of the things that I have accomplished over the years has been through and with my family's help.
Right. Well, I sure do appreciate you, Pastor, taking time out, especially in the evening like this. So, but hopefully we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Hopefully maybe down the road we'll go have some wings or something together
Yes, sir.
sometime. But I
Yes,
really do
sir.
appreciate you.
Absolutely.
All right, that's our conclusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.